what and where to conference workshop by RMSE. And we had our last workshop in November last year, and it was such a success. And I hope you have learned so much about preparing and attending conferences. And now this workshop will be discussing the next step after you have been accepted in a conference, more specifically about networking in conference and giving an effective, persuasive presentation in the conference. Also, what kind of fundings you could apply for conferences as graduate students. So these challenges, like predatory conferences, many students have encountered in the past, give you some practical tips for avoiding them in the future. So I hope this workshop offers some practical advices to graduate students who are experiencing such challenges, meanwhile prepare you for future conferences. And I'm honored to introduce you to our three speakers for today's workshop. First, we have Dr. Mali from the research office. She will tell us different funding students could apply for academic conferences, also some practical tips for networking conferences. Then we have a PhD student from Applied Linguistics, Shaden, will tell us her experiences of going to conferences, like the challenges she have encountered and provide us with tips for avoiding them in the future. And last, we have Paul from Writing Center to talk to us about how to craft persuasive messages and presentation delivery in conferences. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat boxes, or after each presentation, we'll have a short Q&A, so you could ask your questions. So first, let's welcome Mali to present her presentation here. I think you can share your screen now.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me again to this session for the continuous of the first one about how to go to conference and how to apply abstract. That was the first one. And this one, as Ada mentioned, we are going to talk about how to find funding at Western and a little bit tips about networking. My name is Mali, and I'm a research officer at the Faculty of Education. So if anything related to your research funding application or scholarship application, you can definitely reach out of us. And our office is 1161 at the Faculty of Education. Let's first summarize a little bit about what we discussed in the previous workshop, that what is a conference. As we said, we have different type of conference, business, casual, and academic. That our main focus in this workshop is the academic conference. But what is an academic conference? When a group of researchers gathered together in an event and discuss about their work, their fund, their results funding, their issue that they have encountered. That type of gathering and event are usually known as conference. They can be small, from 20 or less, to huge conferences, more than 20,000 attendees per conference. Depends on the conference that you are planning to go. The benefit of going to conference actually are a lot. So first of all, you can find and connect with the professional in your field. So it's a good opportunity to know who is in your field, what people are doing in this field, and know about the issues that the people encounter during their works, and get some great ideas and tips that how to proceed with your work, with your idea, and share information with different people and professional in your field. As a graduate student, definitely attending a conference is a great opportunity because you can improve your presentation skills, and it's very, very important for your future career. But now you're accepted to a conference and it's time to go to a conference. Your abstract accepted, but what should you do? What's the next step? The first thing that you have to think after should I recommend even before applying for any conference is finding the right funding source. When I was a grad student, before attending any conferences, I usually reach out my supervisor and said, okay, that's a conference that we would like to attend. What do you think about it based on the number of presenters, based on the speakers that are going to be in that conference, and also about the funding? Usually supervisor are the first source of funding for you guys. So if you are planning to go to any conferences, definitely first reach out to your supervisors, ask their opinions about the conference, and also see if they have any type of funding available for you guys to attend this conference. Sometimes the supervisor said, yes, we have funding available, but sometimes they may ask you to also find other source of funding or add that funding to your amount that they have for this type of conference. Another source of funding is our office, research office. Definitely you can reach out to our office and apply for the funding that we have for both MA and PhD student, as well as the EdD student. The amount for MA and PhD is 3,000, while this amount is 1,500 for EdD students. Just be sure that read the guidelines properly. You can find the guidelines on our website. We recently modified the guidelines a little bit, and there are also a new portal for registration. So be sure that when you're applying, you are in the exact fiscal year based on the guidelines, and you can send your required document along with the completed form, and also the portal form that you need to fill out to our office. One thing that I should mention here, you can attend different conferences at different locations, but you should consider that for attending different conferences, you can apply for all of them separately. So you can combine all the conferences in one application. So it should be, excuse me, it should be separately, and you should also consider that the whole amount that are going to be given to each person is going to be 3,000 for MA and PhD per year, and 1,500 for EdD student per year. So if you're applying for different conferences and the amount is more than 3,000, we can only support, if you're eligible, up to 3,000. And you have to find another source of funding for the rest of the money. But if you attended, for example, different conferences, one you pay 500, the other one you pay 1,500, and the other one you pay 200, you can prepare different type of form for each of them, as I said, separately, and submit it to our research office. If you are eligible, up to 3,000, you will be awarded. That this number, as I said again, for EdD student is 1,500. Another source of funding that you can look into if you are planning to go to a conference is Society of Graduate Students, or SOCS. So they usually offer up to 500 travel subsidy that you can definitely look into it and apply for that. And if you are eligible, you can get that 500 from SOCS as well. PSAC, the Teaching Assistant and Postdoc Associate Union at Western, is another source of funding. They usually offer maximum 300 per academic year. Just consider that per academic year, you can only apply up to 300. Sometimes some conferences also offer some type of travel award competition. You always have to look inside and check their website, see if they have such a thing like that. If they have, you can apply, and if you awarded, they are going to give you a few $100 usually. But it doesn't mean that all conferences have this type of travel award. I'm adding this section most for people that involved with the Robert Macmillan Symposium. We know that some type of conference also that are presented, such as Robert Macmillan, is free, and it's a great opportunity for a student to attend this type of conferences. But the students that are arranging this conference can apply for $1,000 up to $1,000 through Academic Joint Fund for inviting a person or researcher to their events. So that's an opportunity that university providing. So the event should be happening in London. That's Robert Macmillan is happening here at Western, and you have to go through the website and complete the form, and if you are eligible, they are going to pay you up to $1,000 for inviting a researcher to Western for giving you a talk as a keynote speakers or present their works. So now that we know about the funding, is better to know how to survive a conference. The first thing that you have to do, prepare your presentation or poster. Don't leave it for the last minute, please. Always prepare it ahead. You don't know what's going to happen at 90 minutes. It's better always prepare everything ahead and practice for yourself to be comfortable with what you want to talk. Practice in front of your supervisor, in front of your colleagues, in front of your friends. Ask for their feedback. See what type of feedback they can provide and improve your presentations, or your presentation skills can be improved. Check the conference agenda. It's very important to know that how many poster, how many presentation are going to be presented. For example, each section, how many presentation is going to be there. And actually, how many section a conference can have depends on the type of a conference. We can have one section, or we can have multiple section at the same time. So when you have multiple section, you should know what's happening in each room, so you can pick the best talk and presentation that match with your field, with your interests, and then you can attend. So it's very important to check the conference agenda and see, looking to the speakers, looking onto the papers. Some conferences usually also provide abstract that you can also read and give some idea that which talk you want to attend. Also, some conferences presented some type of workshop aligned with the conference, so you can also look into it and see which workshop is better suited for you and attend that conference. But as I said, knowing the agenda and schedule for attending these talks and workshop require to be prepared, and just review everything before attending a conference. During a conference and during session, what I recommend to do is always be confident. And if you have any question or concern about any talks or presentation, please feel free to ask and be engaged. Don't afraid. We don't have such a thing as a stupid question. Don't think that if you are asking a question and be involved and engaged with the talk and presenter and others, you feel bad. You're afraid that if I'm saying maybe it looks stupid. We don't have such a thing. Ask your question, be engaged. And always during the conference, I recommend also take notes. Who knows, maybe in future you want to use one of these notes, one of these ideas for your future work, for solving one of your problems. Networking is part of the conference. It's a good place to find new people, to find professional in your field and create a connection with them. So what we can suggest is always, as I said, looking into agenda, see who are the speakers who are going to present. If there is a specific person that you would like to talk to, you can also send an email as a heads up, because now we are again backing into in-person conferences, and ask the person that, like you, I'm attending that conference and I would like to have a little bit discussion about topic A, B, or C. So give the person some heads up that you're interested to talk about something on that conference. And before going to this type of networking, always prepare a small conversation, as we said, elevator pitch. So prepare yourself and to be ready when you are going there, just not bumbling and just thinking what you want to say, or not be confident about what you're planning to ask. So after that, always recommend, if you want to keep the connection, follow up. It's very, very important that that person remember you, that that person reached out to me during the conference, asked me these questions, and now that person is reaching me again through email and or add me to the LinkedIn, the professional networking platform. So it's very important to do follow up after that. And if I want to say a few tips about networking when you are going to the conference and summarize everything in one place. Again, as I mentioned, do your homework, find who you want to talk to, why you want to talk to that person. It's very, very important to know. And always, you know, schedule in your head and said, or I don't know, in a piece of paper, I said, okay, I plan to talk to that amount of person. I would like to talk to that person, and just make a schedule for yourself, because you have to know how much time you have during the break. Usually the time that people go and do the networking, talking to one each other, and usually breaks are short, not you don't have all the time. So you have to know who you want to reach out, what type of question you are interested to ask. So it's very, very important to plan everything ahead. You know, prepare your conversation, how you want to start. And sometimes when you're in conference, actually, you see that you're stuck in a conversation that you are not even interested, or you think, okay, I'm in the wrong conversation here. It's better to always have some strategy for yourself to kind of exit from this type of situation as well. So then plan, think about it, that if I'm going to conference, what I want to do is very, very important. I recently noticed that many conferences presented some sort of conference app that you can also use it for networking and communication. Some people bring their business card to the conference, which is a great idea always, but don't rely on them, because so many people maybe receive your business card, but then say bye-bye to that and they don't want to look at it again. So follow up is the best strategy after your any conversation with any person that you are interested in their works. But if you receive a business card from some person, I strongly recommend to keep it and create a business bank, business card bank. It can be something in a cloud, or it can be something physically, and gather all that business card, create, I don't know, in your notebook, and keep note beside that. Who knows, again, in future, maybe you want to reach that person, and it's a great idea to have that information instead of searching and browsing around. And again, the most important thing after the conference, if you want that person remember you, and if you're interested to keep this connection, definitely follow up, send an email, see what you can do, and add that person to your professional platforms such as LinkedIn. If you're aware, we are going to have a LinkedIn workshop February 9th. That's going to be presented by Craig Ingram, manager from Career Education at Western. I strongly recommend to join. I think, as all of you know, that LinkedIn is now a great source of connection and networking, especially for your future career, that you can use and proceed to the next level of your professional life. And that's it from my side. If there is any question, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Mali, for this. It's very helpful, and I'll definitely go to the LinkedIn conference.
Good. I can also share the latest version of this PowerPoint. So if anyone want to have access to that link for different type of funding that I mentioned, so has easy access to that.
Yeah, Ruth, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Melanie. That was awesome. It's so informative. I have two questions, sort of. One is I wanted to point to Alfred's question in the chat because I think I may have just answered too quickly. Where Alfred had asked if it was possible to get any funding for RMSE, which is happening in March, obviously this coming March. And I had said, you know, there's not a lot that would require funding for RMSE because there's no registration fee, and if you're a local student, no accommodation. But I'm wondering if there are maybe some hidden fees that people apply for that I'm not aware of, things like poster printing or something like that. And then my second question was if you could talk a little bit about the purpose of networking. I think I have like a pretty limited understanding of networking as being for future collaborations, to build relationships for future collaborations, but I wonder if there are other reasons that you could talk a little bit about.
First, amazing questions. Go back to your first question. So as we discussed it before, definitely research office can provide some sort of help for poster printing and some sort of funding. So it depends on our budget, as again, we discussed it before. So, but we can help on that for Robert Macmillan Symposium. And I encourage everyone to definitely attend this conference or symposium at Education. It's a great experience. It's a free experience for all of you, and it's also being great on your CV for your future career. Regarding the second question that you asked about networking, yes, networking is about for future collaboration. But if you're looking also into finding a job, and as you can see, the world has been changed. It's not like 10 years ago that you can go to an office and give them your resume and said, okay, I want to apply for this job. And they said, the doors are open, please welcome, and we give you a high salary. No, it's not working like that. For any potential job posting, usually people receive minimum 50 to 100 applications. So creating this network is important because sometimes this network maybe can help you give some suggestions, some ideas, or even write a recommendation for you to that place or location that you are looking for a future job and your career. And it's very important, I think, at the moment to build this type of connections. Based on my experience and based on, I'm not to be honest, a career specialist. You probably can ask this question from Craig Ingram that's going to present about the LinkedIn workshop. But based on the experience, I know that having a networking these days is very, very important for, for kind of reaching your goal. If somebody knows you, knows your background, knows your ability, knows your skill set, and can put it into the words and give some suggestion, so maybe it makes your path easy. It can also work opposite way. Sometimes maybe you think, okay, my network, I know that person, I'm gonna bug that person, but maybe show something opposite. So you should be very careful how you reach out to people, how you ask them, what you ask them, how much this connection is grow, are you very close? Are you, just know one each other. Maybe in your career, time, one of the things that you can see a job posting happen, and maybe you can reach a person that it's in your network and working on that location and said, do you have any idea? Can you give me more information about that job posting? Do you have any idea that how many applicants are going to apply? It's very important, I think, these days that looking into networking play definitely an important role, but it's important to know how to use it, where to use it, and to, to how much you use it. It's very, very important. Just be careful with the wording and with your request.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Molly.
Welcome.
Any other questions? If not, thanks again, Molly, for your presentation. And I'll let Shaden do her presentation first, and then if there are any questions at the end, we'll go back to that.
Okay, can you guys see it? Okay, perfect. Hey everyone, I'm Shaden Hafiya, and I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the Applied Linguistics art. I'm also a graduate fellow and an Ontario graduate scholar. So for today, I mainly wanted to talk about these points. I'll add just a little bit on some additional funding opportunities that are available to us as students, and where to look for conferences and which conferences to avoid, especially predatory conferences. And I'll talk a bit about the advantages of online presentations versus face-to-face presentations, and also some alternate opportunities in case you're not going to be present in a conference. And finally, a little bit of fun, like presentation tips and some of the problems that you might face while doing a presentation and some solutions to kind of resolve those issues. So for these funding opportunities, I mainly wanted to talk about the conference-specific scholarships, which Melly talked a bit about. And mainly I wanted to talk about opportunities that are with the TESOL Arabia and the TESOL Convention, because some people are not very aware of these conference-specific awards. So especially for the TESOL Convention, they have a lot of travel grants, and some of them actually offer you a mentorship kind of relationship with one of their mentors, which can be very beneficial for us as students. And also, I wanted to talk about the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation opportunity, as they do have a research grant fund, which is valued around $3,500. And their revised deadline is going to be in February 1st, in case you are interested in applying. So this is not just for a travel grant, but it is for a research fund. So you can use it for research, to travel, or to publish. However, of course, make sure that you go and check the opportunity and make sure that you are eligible to apply. And where to look for conferences. So first of all, of course, the Faculty of Education is such an excellent source for all of us with ECAS and the graduate office emails. So you usually find multiple opportunities that are available at Western, or conferences that are done in collaboration with other universities here in Canada. So this can be like your first source. And also LinkedIn is an excellent source, and it depends on the connections that you have. You might find some maybe colleagues or people that you follow or universities that you follow. They will advertise for conferences and for the proposal deadline. So this can be an additional source. And of course, your supervisor. So your supervisor is such an amazing place to start, because if they're presenting, for example, in a conference, you can always check if it's possible for you to co-present, and that can be an extra thing that you can add to your resume and to your experience. Other sources are your classmates and fellow educators and researchers. So just make sure that you're comfortable enough to ask people, like, are you presenting in any conferences this year? Would you recommend any conferences? So this kind of connection with other people can, you can find through them a lot of good opportunities that you can benefit from. And also a simple Google search can show you some good results. However, while doing that, make sure that you pay attention to predatory conferences. So I mainly chose to mention this because the predatory conferences and journals are on the rise, and I almost fell for one of them and presented at one of the conferences. And if you're new to the term, mainly predatory conferences are for-profit conferences that masquerade as legitimate academic events, but lack trusted selection and peer review processes. So I wanted to share an example. So especially like if you see this name of conference, the World Academy of Science, Engineering, and Technology, WASIC, that website, and that's their logo. Make sure that you run, because it's like they have bazillion conferences and they don't really care about anything except for getting the registration fee, which usually is quite expensive, and you're not going to get any kind of benefit from presenting there, because like whether their conference proceedings or whatever, people already know, like people who are in the academia, they know that this is not a good place for people to present, so it wouldn't really look good for you. So make sure that you stay away from them and similar conferences. And as for how to avoid these conferences, you'll probably need to do a little bit of detective work to make sure that you know that they are predatory or not. So first of all, just do a quick background check. Check their previous years, like the previous conferences. Check the keynote speakers. Are they well known or not? Maybe the previous locations where they held the conferences, or even their conference proceedings. Also ask around if you're not sure. Make sure that you can check a couple of with people, like your supervisor, course instructors that taught you before, or even fellow educators. And finally, so there are a couple of things that can help you know whether this is legitimate conference or not. So make sure that you check for the length of the review process. Usually it takes some time, so sometimes it can be a couple of months, other times it's a couple of weeks. But make sure that if it takes only one day and once you submit and you're accepted, there's something going on. Because usually with legit conferences, they take time to review your proposal to make sure that it fits in the conference. Also, pay attention to the language used, whether the email exchange with the organizers, the conference invitation letter, and the formality degree and the writing style that they use. And this is actually what gave away that conference for me. It was mainly, they had in the conference name, I believe it was like conference, whatever, number 131st. Instead of ST for first, they had TH. And I was like, there is no way that they would make a mistake or a typo in the conference name. So that was the first thing that made me go back to my supervisor and check with her. And okay, now that we are done with predatory conferences, hopefully you get the chance to do presentations in legit conferences. I would like just to talk a bit about the advantages of both online and face-to-face presentation. So for online, mainly for me as an introverted person, they are like heaven. So first of all, they are at a low cost, sometimes registration only. Also, you don't need to travel, which saves quite a lot of money. It's very flexible, and they're very like, it's an easy access. Usually, like for example, this presentation just Zoom, so it's very easy. It's very accessible for most people. And also the conference, like the PowerPoint presentation mode, is a savior because you can see your notes and it's really helpful. Sometimes with face-to-face, it's a bit difficult because you have to print your notes or kind of memorize all the things that you'd like to say. But for online, you can use that mode. As for face-to-face, of course, there are so many good things about them. So first of all, the interaction with the audience, networking opportunities, as Mally mentioned. So they are great for finding job opportunities and possibly invitations for future talks. And they can also boost your resume. Also, they help you with your communication skills. And in face-to-face conferences, usually you don't need, like, you're not worried about connectivity issues or things like that, like what we worry about with online presentation. And as for how to approach conference presentation, first of all, I would like to recommend that you apply for multiple conferences. And as Mally mentioned, you can apply for, have separate applications for separate conferences. And So this is a good thing because sometimes with conferences that are very competitive, maybe if you don't get accepted, you have at least a backup to use. And also, sometimes you find like really good opportunities, but the deadline is so short. Then if you have a couple of ideas ready, that can help you out. And that can be from your own research, maybe research that you work with your supervisor with, or other possible ideas from maybe coursework or assignments that you can use for conference presentation. And also you can make use of conferences that, like for example, RMSE or Western Research Forum to practice your presentation, because they are led by students, and they're usually it's a very friendly and supportive environment where you can practice, have something also to add to your resume, and at the same time you can get feedback on what you present. As for funding opportunities, make sure that you're aware of the funding opportunities and know the deadlines, and make sure if, for example, the cost is going to be quite high, which funding opportunities that you can combine together to use them for the conference. And finally, make sure that you have some backups. So in case you don't feel like presenting or your proposal doesn't get accepted, there are so many other opportunities that you can use. As I mentioned, student-led symposiums or conferences, also other volunteer opportunities like being a committee member, being a facilitator, or being an abstract reviewer. And I actually wanted to talk a bit more about two opportunities, which are being a reviewer, because I have had the experience doing that before. So let me show you this here. So for reviewing opportunities, you can find them on the websites for the different conferences. And usually, for example, like TESOL Ontario, they always send emails to their members inviting people to volunteer to be a reviewer or a facilitator. So these are excellent opportunities for you to engage with a conference without presenting. Also, your responsibilities are mainly going to be reading, commenting, and suggesting modifications on conference proposals. And these are some of the examples that you can go for. And I've tried all of them, and the experience itself was really rewarding. So I would definitely encourage it. And also another opportunity is being a committee member. So, and being a committee member gives you the chance to apply your expertise in something that you're interested in. For example, you can design posters, advertise, for example, for the conference on social media, maybe communicate with the universities, or being the facilitator. And now I'd like to share some tips related to conference presentation. So first of all, make sure that you know the presentation time, and make sure that you try and match the presentation time with the slides that you have, so that you don't go over time. Also, make sure that you practice, as Mally mentioned, because it's quite important that you're comfortable with the content that you're going to be sharing. Make sure that you're short and concise, because you wouldn't want people to get bored from you talking for a long period of time. And make it interactive if possible, because I know sometimes some topics don't lend themselves to a very interactive discussion, but try and do that as much as you can. And think of possible questions that the audience might be thinking of, and maybe try and prepare a possible answer for them. And finally, have a plan B, just in case maybe you have technical problems, internet issues, or you miss your notes or something similar, so that you're always ready for that. And now off to some bumps that you might face while presenting and how to approach them. And mainly, I wanted to focus on two things. The first one is inaccurate presentation times, because in two different conferences, I was told that, for example, for one of them, I should prepare a 5-minute presentation or 10 minutes. And then it turned out that they needed a presentation for 20 minutes. And another presentation I was supposed to have 25 minutes, and they only give me 20. So in this case, make sure that you remain calm. Know when you're preparing your PowerPoint, which information you might skip, and which maybe if you can have a couple of extra ideas that you might add to your presentation. And also have detailed notes just in case you have extra time so that you can maybe add a little bit more info. At the end, if you don't have any other things to add, you can always make just a kind of a review and a final reflection on your presentation, or simply invite the audience for questions. They have extra time. I'm pretty sure they would appreciate it. They can ask questions and you'll have more time to answer. And for the second issue, that's something that tough questions. I had a couple of those when I was presenting in Singapore. And for how to deal with tough questions, mainly make sure that you answer to the best of your knowledge. Also suggest readings. If you can't add more, you can always say that this author wrote a lot about this topic and hopefully maybe this specific reading can help you. And also make sure that you're honest. If you don't have an answer, that's totally okay. But try and word it in a nice way. You can always say that maybe you need a bit of time to reflect on the topic and then you will reach out to them. But make sure that you reach out to them, whether that's them, like maybe they can have your email or you can take their email and contact them later. And that's pretty much it for my side of the presentation. And I added here one extra source, which is the Slides Carnival. I usually use that website for free PowerPoint templates, and I thought maybe that can be of help to you guys. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shaden. Actually, I have a question about being a reviewer or being a committee member of conferences. I'm wondering what are some qualities you should have before you take on the role?
Well, I think some of them you don't really have like too many qualities you're worried about. You have to prepare to be a reviewer. Usually, for example, for the TESOL convention, they have the graduate forum, where you as a PhD student, you review other proposals by other PhD and MA students. So usually you have background on how, for example, to write a proposal, and you can how to kind of know some of the issues, or maybe the person writing the proposal doesn't use like a lot of references, or they have citation issues. So already you have a lot of qualities that you can use. However, I feel that maybe because I'm an English instructor, so I felt that this is something that helped me quite a lot when I'm reviewing. I look a lot at language, and as I mentioned, the theory that's being used and how they adhere to the rubric that I'm using.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think some people asked in the chat, can you please share the last source you have on your PowerPoint?
Yeah, sure. I'll just copy it and paste it in the chat. Here you go.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone have any other questions? If not, I'll let Paul to talk about his presentation about how to deliver a great conference speech.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'd like to begin by showing a depiction of early humans enjoying a meal together. Now, these early humans had to be extremely vigilant. Why? Because there were constant threats to their safety. As you can see, there is a mosasaur ready to attack them, a tangible threat to their existence. Now, today, we don't have mosasaurs. So we've replaced this threat with intangible threats, such as public speaking. So how many of you are afraid when public speaking, or at least anxious? Hands up. We can all put our hands up, I think, because in certain contexts, we are nervous. Now, here I'd like to show you another picture. And this is a visual representation of all the people on Earth who don't care about your presentation. Now, I forgot to circle some people below South Africa there. So perhaps they care about your presentation, but no one truly cares that much. So I'm saying this because we have a tendency to make presentations bigger than they need to be. So think of a presentation as simply a conversation with people who are interested in your work. One way to combat these fears or anxieties is to put in the legwork. As you can see, we have beautiful swans who are graceful. However, what we don't see below the surface is the furious paddling that they do, right? So when you present, you also have to paddle furiously before the event, and then you will move gracefully on the stage. So how do we do so? First of all, we need to know our audiences. So if I were presenting to the engineering faculty, perhaps I would present in a different way than presenting to you people in engineering. Now then I want to organize my presentation. So you're telling a story about your research. Essentially, assume that people care to an extent about your research, but they don't care as much as you do because you reside in this cocoon, right? If you're a master's or PhD student, you reside in an echo chamber of your own research. Now, the trick is to ensure other people care as passionately about your research as you do. So one thing I would recommend is focusing on relevancy and feasibility. How are you differentiating your research from the works of others? When I attend conferences, I find that there's a tendency for people to focus a bit more on methodology, because methodology is something we feel comfortable about. But what we have to understand is you're at these conferences to actually sell your research, not simply inform people. So think about relevancy and feasibility. Then you want to develop graphics, but ensure that the graphics that you do develop complement you. They don't compete with you. So you don't want slides that are overly busy, and I'll give you an example. You also want to practice, practice, and practice some more, but do not rehearse. So you aren't actually delivering a speech. You are conversing with your audience unless you are reading your research. But today I'm talking about presenting your research. So if you prepare line by line what you want to say, so verbatim, that will be problematic because oftentimes when that happens, if you forget a word, implosion then occurs. I'm sure in the past, all of us have written a speech before, we've forgotten a word, and then we can become derailed. So you want to practice, but not necessarily rehearse a speech. And then finally, you're going to have a conversation with people, right? So you're there, again, not speaking on top, but as our previous speaker mentioned, try and make it as relatable and interactive as possible if you can. So have a conversation. You're having a conversation, you're not necessarily delivering a presentation. So first and foremost, as I mentioned, you want to persuade, you're not simply informing. So you want to contemplate your research existence. So why is your research important? That's what people care about. So you know it's important. Again, think of strategies to ensure they think your research is important. Then you wish to do an audience assessment. So who are the people actually viewing your presentation? Who are they? So as I mentioned, if I'm discussing a topic with the engineering faculty, I'm going to use a lot of quantitative data. Perhaps in this environment, I may not. But try to figure out as much as possible who these people are so you can establish buy-in. What do they want to hear? So most viewers want to hear about your research aim, of course, the scope of your research, the relevancy, the overall feasibility, your methodology, but perhaps to a lesser extent. Your results are incredibly important. And finally, future research. Then determine how much they know. because if they know little about your research, then you're going to have to provide more context. But if they already know what you're talking about, you can expedite matters and get to the crux of what you wish to discuss. It also will depend or determine the terminology that you use, right? So are you defining words or are you not? Well, if people already know the terms, then you don't want to define those terms because you have a finite amount of time to say what you want to say. So you also have to consider the overall complexity of your research. So if you are speaking with like-minded individuals, perhaps you could communicate in a more complex manner. But I would argue that simplicity is beautiful. So oftentimes when I read papers from education, I will encounter something like this. I will evoke a qualitative, grounded, interpretive, social with a hint of cognitive, constructivist, epistemological approach undergirded by modern systems theory and further underscored by contingency theory filtered through a transformational leadership paradigm lens, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, that's problematic because if people don't understand what your research is, if it's not clear, if it's not concise, then of course, they're not going to care. So think about one main theory that undergirds your work, explain it, but be simple because as graduate students, your job is to teach. And sometimes I think we forget, right? So it's not about impressing everyone with your beautiful lexicon, right? See what I did there? It's actually about teaching and communicating. So simplify. Ways to do that. Consider front-loading your research. So if you're talking about an intricate process, explain that process as a whole, right, in general terms, and then partition and discuss more complex parts of that process. You want to scaffold. So you're in education, you understand scaffolding, right? You're not going to learn about astrophysics in grade 4. You may learn in grade 5, depending on the quality of the school you went to, I guess, but most likely students are going to learn about addition and subtraction and multiplication before they get to astrophysics. So craft your presentation from less complex to more complex, as you would when you're teaching. And finally, consider defining what terms that need to be defined. And I would argue it's better to over-define than to under-define. Because if people don't understand what you're saying, that's a more egregious offense than if they're hearing some information that they may deem repetitive. You may also engage. One way to fight anxiety is to find joy in the presentation, right? Have some fun, engage. So here are some examples, and I teach at the Ivey Business School. Here are some examples of introductions that my students use. So we have today, we'll be covering analytics. Another speaker began with the fundamental attribution error is an important concept in business. Then a person began with nothing frightens me more than math. And then another individual started with ladies and gentlemen. I'll tell you right now, I did not like the ladies and gentlemen beginning. Now, did I like today we'll be covering analytics? Not really, it was boring. The second one at least is highlighting relevancy, but of all 4, I actually enjoyed the third bullet point because it spoke to me. I too am frightened by math, and the person knew this. So you want to ensure that you're building a bridge with your audience as much as possible. But engagement matters. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So again, try and enjoy the moment as much as possible because there are very few times in life in which people are confined in a room, forced to listen to you. So you may as well enjoy it. Next, you want to create an outline. And in academia, essentially, this is what you're always doing, right? You're building connections by establishing the familiar, right? As educators, you do that when you are teaching. Then you're problematizing the status quo, right? Sometimes, and again, this is why you need the audience analysis, because if your research is avant-garde, then perhaps you shouldn't start with, here is my research. You have to woo your audience more. You have to provide some context and explain what you're doing a bit more before you spring the avant-garde research upon them. But if everyone is in agreement for the most part with what you're doing, if you can determine that, then perhaps you need less context. So then you're disrupting your reader by introducing new thought-provoking information. And you want to provide varied evidence, right? Varied support, because different people in your audience may be persuaded by different types of evidence, right? Of course, qualitative or quantitative. Some people are more influenced by storytelling. Some people are not. So you can't appeal to everyone. And when you are crafting your presentation, you have to be true to your own voice, but you do have to consider as much evidence and types of presenting when you are trying to influence your audience. Then you hopefully are opening further research windows, you're sparking conversations, and then you can rejoice, for you have added to the scholarly dialogue. Then you want to develop visuals, right? So we're thinking about crafting our presentation. You want to develop visuals. Here is a visual that I created a number of years ago when I was a master's student in education. And I'm extremely proud of this visual that took me an extremely long time to create. And this is the struggle for a democratic education. And I focused on neoliberalism and how it impacts Ontario schools. So to me, this is a wonderful visual, but it would be an absolutely horrible visual to use at a conference. Why? Because this visual would be competing with me as a speaker. No person could digest this information in the allotted time that you have while presenting. So you must break it down. Integrate beautiful white, or in this case, black space on your screen, so people can actually process the information. Limit the information that you provide, because people will simply read what you have. They will not be listening to what you have to say. So here's an example of some information conveyed that is easily accessible. I've used a big number slide. So say if you do have data, consider what is the most important data point and how can I effectively showcase that information. So here, according to recent research, 100% of people who drink water will die. We can, again, process that information. Here's another example, using color. So we have the number of times the average education graduate student name drops French philosophers at parties. So we can see that Foucault gets the most. And our eyes are drawn to the yellow. So bright colors, use bright colors, but ensure that you use them sparingly, because your eyes will be drawn to those colors. I will be silent for about 20 seconds here as you peruse this slide. Okay, I'm sure you're very fast readers. Why did I craft this particular slide? It's because I've witnessed thousands of presentations over the years in which I can't actually see the text. So when you are creating your slides, ensure that the font size is at bare minimum 24, bare minimum. But I suggest you go higher, right? Have limited information on the screen and ensure that when you do provide text, because you want to be visual, right? Diagrams are wonderful, but if you do have text, ensure that your readers or viewers can view what you've produced. Also, when it comes to slide design, find many people to review your slides. Look at them yourselves, but find other people. I remember years ago going to a rhetorician conference, and the keynote speaker on a PowerPoint that was larger than any screen I'd ever seen made a mistake with the word there. He meant to say T-H-E-I-R. And you can imagine all of these writing types, 1,000 of us were in the audience saying pshaw, right? We use words like that, saying, I can't believe this mistake was there. So if you want to lose credibility very quickly, ensure that you have mistakes on your slides. The problem is you become the greatest editor imaginable while you are presenting. That's when you will find your mistake. So look yourself, but also find other people to review. We at the Writing Support Center will look at your slide decks. We will review them. So keep that in mind in the future. Then you want to converse. You're conversing with actual human beings. And I'm going to just give a brief anecdote regarding this person, Keith Richards. He is the guitarist for the Rolling Stones. Now, the Rolling Stones are a band who have a vast catalog of music. And Keith Richards was interviewed, and the person said, "How do you remember what chords to play? You have so many songs." And he said, I don't think about it. And I thought that was phenomenal advice for playing the guitar, but also for presenting, because you don't want to think while you are presenting. If you are thinking about what you're going to say in the near future or what you just said, that's when implosion occurs. So be present, know your material well enough that you can deviate from that material and you will not discombobulate. So be present, think less. It's like playing the piano or any instrument or playing a sport. If you think about shooting a basketball, it won't go in, right? You have to know the mechanics. You have to understand this is what I do, put in all of the work. You're paddling like that swan under the water, and then it becomes second nature. So don't think. It seems like very strange advice, but it's probably the best advice I can give you. Then when you are presenting, ensure that your audience does not flatline. You want to keep them engaged while you speak. So of course, project and practice, as the other speakers mentioned before, practice how you're going to say it, but it's okay to deviate, right? Again, don't script, but you need to project. You need intonation. Of course, be engaged, right? Be enthusiastic, because people feed off your enthusiasm. Stress key words that you want to stress. You know, what's important in this particular sentence? Stress the word. You know, articulation, pace, maybe speed up a little bit, slow down, especially with complex information. Perhaps you could speak more loudly. Perhaps if something is extremely important, you could whisper. Now, if I whispered throughout this entire presentation, you would think that's very strange. But occasionally we can disrupt and people will be engaged. And I've left pausing for last, because what I've witnessed is a lack of pausing. And what that tells me, when students do not pause, or any speaker does not pause, it means they lack confidence. I see great rapidity. Now, I may be speaking a bit more quickly than I usually do because my time is extremely limited, but you want to pause to show that you are in control of your environment. So if you show that you're in control, you're confident, it makes your research seem stronger in a way, because you are confident, you're projecting confidence, and now your research also seems more confident. But it takes great courage to pause, as Cobain once said, and she is a communications guru. It takes great courage. So practice, right? Practice pausing. You will convey confidence. Also, I'm so embarrassed by this picture, but this is me, right? This is my health card. And look at the eyes, right? Look at the eyes. So when you're presenting, eye contact is crucial. It's extremely important. But what I see, my students, they have a tendency to just scan, you know, from one section of the room to the other or back, or they look at their shoes or whatnot. What you want to do is look in the eyes of individuals while you speak and finish the sentence, right? Look at someone, finish the sentence, and then go to the next person, right? Instead of the scanning or looking above their heads, as maybe some teacher in elementary school may have said to you years ago if you were not very confident speaker. But eye contact is extremely important. So I would argue hold it for at least 1 to 3 seconds with individuals. Right? You don't want to hold much longer than that, because then studies have shown amorous feelings develop if you look in someone's eyes for too long. And We don't necessarily want that. We just want to show confidence. Then you want to answer questions, right? So my colleague did mention about answering questions, so I won't go into detail. But when you answer questions, you've done that audience analysis. So hopefully you've anticipated what questions people may ask. And if I may add to what was stated earlier about tough questions are really good because it shows that the person has listened intently to your research. So don't get defensive when people ask the tough questions. It really does show that they care and they have listened. So anticipate the question, listen to the question. And it's very difficult sometimes because you've just finished your presentation. And we have a tendency to simply slow our processes down now because we feel good. Okay, it's over. We must listen intently and clarify the question. So I'm speaking of you're presenting in a larger room. If someone near the front, for example, asks you a question, clarify, because it also buys you time, right? It buys you time. You can formulate an answer. So clarify, paraphrase what their question was, and then amplify so everyone in the room can hear the question, because oftentimes we can't if we're sitting at the back of the room. And then maintain your style. Right? Don't change. You're very confident when you speak, and then all of a sudden you lose your confidence because someone has asked you a difficult question. And then finally, network, as what was stated earlier. I will finish by, if nothing else, say something good about Vygotsky, because people in education love Vygotsky, and then they will love you if you say something wonderful about Vygotsky. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Paul. That was really interesting. Many times I laughed about your PowerPoint.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone have a question? I actually have a question. So when I do presentation each time, and at the end, I have a time for Q&A, but sometimes like that, no one is asking questions. So when that happens, what do you do to make the environment less awkward?
If you're at a conference, I would plant a question. So if you're going with someone, maybe a colleague of yours is present, just say, if no one asks a question, could you ask it? Or talk to the chair and just say, could you ask me a question if no one does ask? A good chair should ask a question.
Thank you. Yes, Ruth.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. That was a great presentation. And I love how you give so many very specific pointers on, crafting your slides and crafting your presentation. I also have a question about difficult questions. I was just at a conference recently, and I was grateful that after I finished my presentation, I had a number of questions, and there was like a very emotional response from the audience. So I know that they were listening and engaged in the presentation. But I felt like I was asked a question that I couldn't really answer. So I'll just say it. My research is on virtual schooling. And so one of the audience members, actually a few of the audience members were from Australia, and they just said, well, why does Ontario even still have virtual schools? We don't have those anymore in Australia. And so I was sort of like, they went on to say that we should not have them. And so I was a little taken aback where, like, okay, if you don't think we should have them, it was hard to find the question in there and how to respond. So I wonder if you could add a little bit to how to respond to those questions that go beyond your presentation.
It's interesting because I think you, on the one hand, you want to welcome the debate because that's what academia is about. It's about critical thinking and it's about debate. On the other hand, you also want to avoid grandstanding, which does happen at presentations where someone may want to espouse their wonderful research and they have a tendency to hijack proceedings, unfortunately. So you want to avoid that. Again, a chair should step in if that event happens. But I would just say welcome the debate. So why do you think virtual schooling does work? Right? So again, it's a matter of, number one, confidence too, and thinking, okay, no, I feel strongly in virtual schooling. If you do, perhaps you don't, but maybe you could just meet this person in the middle somewhere and say, well, I see what you're saying. So you're showing that you're listening to them. However, research has also shown blah, 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 right? So again, it's difficult sometimes because you can be taken aback, right? We've all experienced in life, someone has said something to you that was egregious and you think, oh my goodness, I don't know what to say to this person. And then you remember half an hour later. And that can be very frustrating, of course. But in the moment, it is difficult. And that's where anticipation really comes into play, and knowing our audience. So, okay, what's happening in Australia? What's happening in Europe? How may it differ, right? Especially with virtual presentations, you could get people from everywhere. It's extremely easy when you no longer have travel costs. So it makes the prep time even more difficult and time consuming, I would say. But you can't know everything about everything, and that's fine, right? So in many cases, you can simply say, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you now. However, I can certainly get back to you, as Shaden mentioned earlier before, I believe. So yeah, I'll ask my colleagues too to jump in if they wish, but I would say welcome the difficult question and feel confident about your research and having the right answer.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Yes, my question is, there have been instances where you've been told to use certain techniques, rules. For example, you have the 5x5 rule for creating slides.
Right.
What about those techniques to helping us create good slides for our presentations?
Sure. Unfortunately, time is limited. I could talk about this for quite a while, but when it comes to slide design, less is more. So remember, when you're presenting, it's about your audience. It's not about you. Oftentimes when presenters craft slides, they're doing so in a manner that benefits them, but not their audience. And they use their slides as a crutch. So you have, full sentences. I would avoid using, for example, full sentences when you present, unless perhaps you're interrogating words that someone else has used before and you have to include a sentence. But ultimately, try and be as visual as possible. So diagrams are better than text. You mentioned the 5x5 rule. So that's simply, for those of you who don't know, it's just 5 bullet points downward and then 5 words across. Now, if you do that, that's fine. But if you do it for every single slide that you have, then you're not disrupting your audience enough and you're not engaging them. So as far as rules are concerned, I prefer to just break rules. And the rule breaking, number one, is just be visual. Use large visuals also. So use the entire canvas at your disposal. A lot of times I see visuals that are just way too small, right? And they're not impactful. But use them not just for ornate reasons, just because they look pretty, but try and think, are these visuals actually helping inform? That's what I mean about competing. Sometimes people just throw in a visual because they think it looks nice. However, your viewer will be looking at those visuals, not listening to you, and that's a problem. Or if you have too much text, they're just going to sit there and read your text. So I don't have a tried and true rule for you, Alfred, but I would say just less is more. And if you did come to the Writing Support Center and you had examples and you wanted to meet with me, I would gladly look at those slides and say, well, okay, how could we condense them?
Okay. I will come around.
Sure, I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. I think we're over time, but it's just get interesting when we're talking about these topics. If anyone have any questions, you could just email me or email Paul, Shaden, or Molly after this. And yeah, I think today went very well and we have learned a lot from it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.